listening to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. Before we get started, make sure you give us a rating and some feedback on wherever you get your podcast from, if you can. It really does help us make better content for you, and we really appreciate it. This is episode 98, which is part 2 of our 2-part series on concealed carry. In this part, we go over what we've learned on our own firearms journeys, how to avoid common mistakes we covered in part 1, and add our tips and suggestions to the new concealed carrier. As always, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy episode 98 of Range Minded, the Concealed Carry Episodes Part 2, CCW Tips and Tricks. So let's move on to the part 2 then of our own personal our own personal journey on that one.
Our journey.
Things that we've learned, maybe some questions that weren't brought up in the list or whatever,
Sure.
And go from there. So we touched on, kind of how we started a little bit now, but where do you think you're kind of at in your journey in concealed carry?
Well, I think it's an ever evolving thing. Like,
right.
At least I think it should be an evolving thing, whether it's in your training or your holster selection or whatever, because we need to become better no matter what. And if we're doing our part, then something's going to have to change in our process. At least that's the way I feel.
Yeah, and you should always be learning, always evolving, and even trying new things. Because especially with the cool thing about the gun world is that there's always new products and new things coming out. I mean, I have to imagine the options to be able to carry concealed are way better than they were when you started. Almost 20 years ago. Right.
Well, even holster selection. Right. So we talked about last episode how my first firearm was the Springfield XD in 40. Well, really, the holster to have was the Blackhawk Serpa,
right?
And so, but now, you walk onto any training facility with a Serpa, they're going to say, switch your holster, or you need to leave.
Yeah, and they're not even going to allow you to have it. I mean, I even remember 4 or 5 years ago in my first concealed carry training class where they said, "This is why if you have a Serpa holster, we're not going to let you on the range, and here's why." And they actually had one and showed where your finger can get into the trigger guard, in the trigger by accident and have a negligent discharge.
Yeah. And I still feel that's a training thing. Like I think it can be overcome with proper training, but
sure.
I can see their side of at least the liability side where they don't want to have to deal with any problems in the class. And I totally get it.
Yeah. Especially with somebody, who's not experienced with it, law enforcement, military, somebody who's, shooting maybe hundreds or thousands of rounds a month or something is one thing, but it's somebody who's not stress inoculated and somebody who's had maybe just the bare minimum training, probably not the best choice.
No, we get that sympathetic reflex where we clench our hands, and that's where the problem comes from the Serpa. I mean, I think in the intent of design, I think it was sound, like it was a great idea.
Yeah.
But there was just an unintended consequence that manifested itself a few years down the path.
Right. And that was in the last, 5-10 years that was, like you said, the thing to have. And now it's changed to different styles of holster. And 15-20 years ago, Kydex really wasn't much of a thing at all.
Yeah. I don't remember ever seeing anything, and maybe there was, but I just don't remember seeing any kind of a custom Kydex holster, and even manufacturers making anything for at least the regular consumer.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm glad it's taken place, obviously, because I've got a few different Kydex options that I prefer. So
yeah, one of my mistakes that I did was I cheaped out on my first holster because I go, well, all it is some some fabric and some plastic or whatever and blah blah blah, and it'll do the job or whatever. It's otherwise they wouldn't be selling it, right?
Yeah. Did it come from your uncle?
No, it actually didn't. It came from Out of This World.
Oh, nice.
So, which really wasn't a terrible holster. I still have it, but when you buy one that's a little more, higher in price and feels way more comfortable, you realize very quickly that you get what you pay for in that regard.
And you absolutely do. I know we've beat this over and over again, but when you go from a crappy big box store option that's sold everywhere in the United States, and you go to a good form-fitted holster that keeps its shape, it's a big difference.
Yep. It's comfort-wise, printing-wise, I would even argue safety wise to a degree.
Oh, I would say the safety is the number one thing that takes place there.
Yeah, one of the things I would say is the mark of a good holster is one that completely covers the trigger guard and has a pretty good um, thick, amount of kydex on it. One that's not going to buckle and bend
and some level of retention. I mean, that's obviously important. You don't want the gun to fall out while you're riding your four-wheeler or walking down the street or something, bending over to pick something up. Spend the money.
Spend the money on it. You will not regret it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've gone through, I actually have several servo holsters, honestly.
Oh, really?
I don't use them anymore, but well, actually that's not true. I'll use them like if I'm walking through the woods or something, because then I'll obviously it's an outside the waistband type thing, and it just an ease of getting to my gun. I'll use it that way. But any kind of training or for concealment, obviously I don't choose that option. I go for a custom holster for anything else. But
well, that actually leads me to a great new question that I had that I was going to pose to you is, obviously, there are some states, and Idaho is one of them, where you can, open carry. So when are the appropriate times to concealed carry, and when are the appropriate times, if any, to open carry?
So for me personally, like it's not that I'm uncomfortable to open carry when I'm in a major public setting. I just prefer to conceal carry pretty much everywhere I go.
Right.
And not so much because I'm worried about any kind of backlash. I'll talk about guns and gun law to anybody at any time. I'm not scared about that. But I just want to be less of a target, kind of like the sleeper guy that can be unsuspected if something does arise.
Yeah, people don't. The one that people don't think about.
I'd rather be there. If I was a bad guy, I would go for the biggest threat first, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if I see somebody that's open carrying, I'm probably going to take out the most resistance I would get first. At least that's my logic for bad guys. So if a bad guy doesn't know I'm carrying, A, I'm not a target, and B, maybe I'll have some element of surprise, or I'll be the one with the action, not the reaction.
Right. You might have a leg up, to put it another way.
Right. But when it comes to if I'm running a training class or if I'm outside shooting with buddies, then I open carry.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think, you most of the time see in a range or in a class or anything like that is you're going to see people open carrying. And, I think you should, even if you don't open carry, every day or anything like that, you should have an outside the waistband holster where you can use in a training situation or, even if you're out in the woods or something where, like you said, it's, you might want to be able to get to your gun faster. You're, traversing terrain that's a little more rugged than a sidewalk or a big box store hallway,
Well, like I said, riding a four-wheeler, if I'm riding my four-wheeler, appendix carry is not going to be comfortable.
Right.
For a day's ride. I'm going to want something that's outside the waistband, that's not going to interfere with anything, my bag or any whatever I have that I can still get to my gun if I need to.
Yeah. And then if you go to a restaurant or something like that afterwards, usually people aren't going to notice or they're not going to,
Yeah, and I've open carried in places. Like I remember working here in Idaho Falls, and after my shift, I went to Walmart. This was before Walmart came out with their absolutely no guns BS. But
right,
I got lots of looks. I mean, but I was also wearing my range employee shirt. Like everybody could see what I was doing. Like, it would have been difficult to think of me as a threat with how I was dressed in full, I guess.
Right. You looked at the part, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I looked more like a police officer, honestly, than I did any kind of an employee of a range, but
right.
It's all good.
And if you're in hunting gear or something like that, and, you've got all of your camouflage on, when you're open carrying, people are going to, I think, understand where you're coming from or where you're going, I think a little bit more, like I say, and look the part a little bit. So,
yeah.
But no, that's just because some people might be considering open carrying as opposed to, concealed carry or anything like that. But I think most people are more fans of concealed carry, just in terms
Yeah.
of, not garnering attention.
Now, if I'm carrying specifically to get attention, I would not do that.
No.
I think that's irresponsible, and it's actually counterintuitive for prolonging our Second Amendment rights. So if you guys want to walk around carrying your AR through downtown Boise, whatever, that's your thing. Personally, I find that irresponsible and in a way kind of repulsive, honestly.
Right, but I will say, unless you're doing some kind of
rally,
march. A rally,
a rally is completely different. But if I'm specifically going just to cause a problem and say, "Look at me," then in my opinion, that's less than stellar.
Yeah, if you're doing a Second Amendment check, that's probably not the best idea.
Yeah.
So, so definitely that's why I think we would say concealed carry is the way to go, as opposed to 95% of the time, as opposed to open carry.
Yeah.
So, but I never have open carried. I've after doing a shift of RSOing at the range or something, I've left it on in the car or whatever, but never really gone into a store or anything like that. But like I said earlier, that's kind of part of planning your day, is that if you don't want to do that, or you've got to go somewhere that you don't have, you're prohibited from carrying, or it's illegal to carry, because I'll get to that difference in a minute, but you could be in a whole heap of trouble if you're carrying somewhere that's illegal too. So, it's really not worth jeopardizing. Not that you're going to go through legal problem, you're going to be found guilty or any of that stuff, but it's not really worth the legal jeopardy to go through that stuff. Just take a few minutes and disarm and put your carry gun on. Yeah. And I would say too that, get some kind of, safe storage for your firearm in your vehicle.
Absolutely.
Just throwing it in your glove box or in the center console or something, is not a great way to keep it safe. Especially, and you see it a lot here in Idaho, where, you have a lot of gun stickers on cars. If you have a gun sticker on your car, that shouts to me that, you are a great target to try to steal a firearm from, if I were a bad guy.
Yeah, that's true. I would say, yeah, that's correct. Sorry, I was going to kind of go down a different avenue, but I'm not. So I don't disagree with that statement at all.
Yeah, because, like you said, you have, in as much as you plan your day, maybe there's something that happens that you have to go into let's say a government building, for example, where it's illegal for anybody to carry. You may have to go in there for some reason or another, and you need a safe place to store your firearm no matter what. So,
I got a great example of that a few years ago. I actually got hired on as in a local county here in Eastern Idaho, and I had an interview. I needed to go visit with a particular person in this building in the sheriff's office. And I knew I needed to take off my gun. Obviously, I got rid of all that stuff. Well, they still have metal detectors. I didn't realize that I picked up some range candy before I had left, and I forgot to empty my pockets. And all I had was one 9mm cartridge. One. Yep. And the guy's like, "Look, I could really freak out over this. Like, we could have a big problem.
Right.
Just go put that back in your car and come back through." He's like, "I can't let you in with any kind of ammunition." So it's really easy to think, oh, that doesn't. I didn't even think it mattered, because it was just a bullet or a cartridge, not a big deal.
I think one of the good ways to look at it is, if you wouldn't go through an airport with it, probably shouldn't have it on you when you go into a government building or any kind of illegal place. And really, like, especially in Idaho, there aren't that many illegal places, but there are some prohibited places that you can't go.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. And it's up to you to know the difference.
Right. And I'll say that at least as far as my understanding is, obviously illegal is no matter, under any circumstances, unless you're law enforcement or, somebody special, you can't carry there no matter what. Right. But if, a prohibited place is some place that's a private business, that says, like Walmart, like you said, for example, we don't allow people to carry firearms here at all. Or, it could be your church, or it could be, just any business or your work, for example. That's another big one where, you can't carry at work. Maybe, you're not going to get arrested for it, but you can get fired for it.
Right.
Um,
Right. Or maybe get charged with trespass, So
right. Exactly. So
it's
the question I was going to ask you was that, if a place is prohibited, but, or prohibits firearms, but you don't want to necessarily, follow, do you follow those rules or do you just conceal, because the argument we say is concealed means concealed. And so if nobody knows, then, what's the difference? But, you could be getting into trouble.
so that's the very first thing is concealed. Some of those places I just won't patronize at all. If they made a stance, for example, I've never eaten at a Buffalo Wild Wings,
Right.
Because they've came out publicly and said that they don't support. It might have been open carry, but at the time they said any kind of firearms carry.
Yeah.
So I don't go to Buffalo Wild Wings. I guess let's see. The best way to put it is, I prefer to keep my family safe as often as possible, and it's worth the risk sometimes for me to go any place because concealed they don't know.
Yep, and
concealed is concealed.
That's going to be a choice you're going to have to make for yourself, and for example, too, like there are some places at work that or at offices where you're not allowed to carry, and you have to decide that if that's worth the risk of maybe losing your job versus, your protection. It depends, obviously where you work and the kind of the line of work that you're in, but you better know kind of those laws and those rules.
Right.
Cause like I said, you might not get arrested for it, but you can get fired or you can,
So I have a friend that works for a fairly large corporation that's, as far as I know, they have stores in every state. And he's management. He's a little ways up in a company.
Sure.
And policy is, they can't carry. But I'm pretty sure, like, if I was a betting man, I would say that he's definitely carrying everywhere he goes.
Well, and that's what it goes by. Concealed means concealed.
Yep. Yeah, I refuse to be a victim. I mean, I understand my rights. I understand that private companies can do their own thing, but I'm not too concerned about it.
Right. It's just something important that you really should keep in mind and be aware of. And there's I'll buzz market something else. There's an app called Posted that you can download that'll show you what places you can carry at, what places that are have postings that say firearms are prohibited. Which if it's on your phone, you can't really help not knowing when it's right there. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
and like you've said that we talked about before, that's something that we always weigh the issue on. Is it's something that you just have to really think about. Like, are you willing to take that risk? That's part of carrying. Is the commitment to carry, is taking that risk.
And actually that leads me great to my next point, was that if you're carrying somewhere, in public, let's say like a restaurant or maybe even somewhere like your church or work or anything like that, what kind of mindset do you think that you have to have, in regards to security? Obviously you can't, we've talked about the color codes before about, condition white being just completely oblivious to everything. You really can't be that way when you're carrying concealed.
Right. Yeah. You it's still up to you. So don't do stupid things.
Yeah. And you have to really think about, you have to be, what's the word? I guess strategic in how you do things, because, even something as simple as going to a restaurant and sitting with your back to the front door, or any of the entrances, not knowing how to get out of there, or not knowing, what the best thing to do is if something happened, and an active shooter situation happened, you have to think about those things as part of being a concealed carrier, I think.
Yeah. And that's And that comes, we talked about training. That really comes down to the training issue too, is knowing where to sit and how to sit and all that stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of practical things you got to think about to it. So you really do have to have that mindset. And it's a lot more than just carrying a gun. It's being aware and what you're going to do. Cause like one thing I'll do is that, whenever I go to a movie, it's, I'll see where the exits are and think about, okay, if something were to happen where somebody came in, how am I going to get out of this situation?
Yeah.
Which it's not something fun to think about, but, it could mean the difference between getting out alive and not.
It's a reality though. And it's something that even people that don't carry anything for defense, something they should think about anyways is just kind of planning ahead.
Yeah. It doesn't cost you anything.
I think there was a book, was it called The Survivor Code or something like that really went through that very mindset of planning ahead to be a survivor, like making conscious choices, knowing where the exits are, knowing what planning ahead of if this plane happens to have some kind of a crash landing, how am I going to get out? Or if I get in a car accident, what steps am I going to take? So there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to be a concealed carry holder to think about that kind of stuff in advance. It's really a good mindset regardless.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's just thinking about that in advance and knowing what you're going to do if a certain situation happened. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, and I can't remember the name of the book. I think I'll have to look. I can't remember. I think it was written by Sully, the pilot that crash landed in the Hudson.
Oh, really?
Remember Sullivan? I think it was written by him.
Sullenberger.
I'll have to do some research. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So I think it was written by him. I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to do some digging.
We'll post it on the Facebook page once we figure it out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of talked about most of our journey here and what we're, where we're at. So, maybe we talk about kind of our gear setup now. Like how do you carry? What do you carry?
Sure.
As much as you want to share, it's not really like a secret because nobody's going to notice, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, you've been through 20 years of it. What's your current setup?
So I think we could say the official carry is appendix carry.
Yep.
I prefer inside the waistband appendix carry. Obviously that comes down to firearm size. We talked about that last time. I went from that Springfield through a couple iterations. Now I carry my modified, I call it the Glockster. You guys may have remember seeing that before on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
Which a 43 with a 43X slide or a 48 slide.
You're kind of all hooked up on your own. Yeah, it's almost custom, really.
So it's super accurate. I've shot at targets a long ways away with that gun. I have a good idea of where it hits at any given distance. It's small enough to tuck in my waistband, but I got enough length there, barrel length there, that I'm pretty confident of where my shots are going to go.
Right.
Would I carry something different? I'm not opposed to it. I've thought about carrying a 19, which I know a lot of people will appendix carry a 19. I'm not quite sure how they do it.
They're really skinny. That's how they do it.
I got a little extra fluff.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to imagine that.
Yeah, I feel you.
Excuse me. But I'm not opposed to it. My holster right now, actually, I have two holsters that I use are both Hoftacks. I like Nick stuff, so I support Nick. And yeah, that's pretty much my concealed rig. When it comes to outside the waistband stuff, I'm running a Safari Land. I can't remember what model of holster it is right now, and then just some other Mag Caddies I've kind of monstrosity together on my belt. So
yeah. So do you ever carry outside the waistband, but concealed like during the winter, like the cold months? Because your carry rate can change with the seasons. It doesn't have to, but it can.
I have in the past, but I still prefer not to, because sometimes I'll take my jacket off or whatever. So I pretty much just always carry appendix, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and then there's no having to change your mindset really or anything like that. You can just kind of remember that it's the same thing all the time. You don't have to think about changing at all.
Yeah, the only thing I do different in the winter time compared to the summertime is I'll wear two shirts and I'll tuck in my t-shirt. I'll tuck that in so my concealed carry is not rubbing right up against me, and I got just an extra layer of between me and the gun. And then I'll
Sure.
carry, or I'll wear either a button up or a sweatshirt or something, just so it's easy for me to get to the gun.
Yeah, and having that extra layer does really help, and having a cover garment really does help with printing as well. You really don't, even think twice about printing once you have a cover garment. At least in my experience.
Yeah, I never have to worry about it. And oh man, sorry.
We keeping you up?
No, that Bundaberg I think helped me get sleepy.
There you go.
I like wearing button ups anyways,
Sure.
so I'll even the summertime I'll wear a button up shirt with another t-shirt underneath. So it pretty much I guess is uniform year round, honestly.
Well, that's probably the best way to do it, because then you don't have to change anything around. You're not thinking about, well, is it here? Or am I carrying, strong side or whatever? It's in the same place every time, and you don't have to worry about it.
And I think we've talked before about my migration of carry, where I've started in the small of my back 6 o'clock, and I've just worked my way around to 12 o'clock. And in my mind, logically, it makes the most sense for me.
Yeah.
And it may not be the best choice for other folks, but that's just what I prefer.
It works for you, and that's pretty similar to what my carry is. My carry is a Walther PPS in a T-Rex Arms holster, actually. Appendix T-Rex Arms, I believe it's not the sidecar, it's the yeah, you know what I'm saying. I think it's their I can't remember, but it's a really nice holster. It's got that claw on it that can that pushes against your waistband a little bit, so the
pushes the gun into you.
Yeah, the gun is pushed into it a little bit to minimize that printing, because I've got a little fluff as well. Which I will say, appendix carrying really does make you think about your fitness level and your diet habits. That's for sure. So.
Yes, it does.
But yeah, just keep it simple like that, and then I'll have a mag pouch, on the side next to it. And I really do want to get one of their sidecars though, where it has kind of everything put together. I think that's a much better balance of, of the weight, around your firearms. So that'll be on the list.
And it's nice to have your holster or your magazine right there up front too. It does make a difference. If you guys haven't thought about carrying appendix, find you a good inside the waistband appendix holster.
Yeah, that's something that we didn't talk about either.
Just try it out. Like, I know, I guess it can be expensive if you're getting set up only to use it once or twice, but I like it. I like it a lot.
Well, and you have that kind of peace of mind of just knowing that you've got, you've got plenty of ammunition. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
So, the Raptor, that's what it is. Sorry. The T-Rex Arms Raptor. The Raptor. The T-Rex Arms Appendix Raptor holster, which they make for all kinds of different guns. And then it's got it comes with the big clip and then the J kind of clip or whatever, which is great. So, you've got a lot of options there, but I really do want to try one of their sidecars, which is a Raptor with a mag patch on it, or a mag pouch on it. So, but that kind of speaks to, like I said, the ever evolving kind of, checking, rechecking, and changing your setup as you go along with what works for you.
Yeah, and looking at T-Rex stuff, it's actually pretty affordable, really.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I mean, compared to whatever else is out there, and but always, like I said, Nick makes good stuff, and there's a lot of good gear manufacturers out there. Especially I think we're starved, or we're gluttons for choice nowadays.
Yeah, there's so much stuff out there that's available.
Yeah,
it's almost overwhelming at times.
Yeah, but that's what YouTube is for. That's what, and excuse me, even though I said you don't really want to take too much stock in it, but you can watch a handful of different videos and take what you like and what you don't. And like you mentioned too, most people kind of have a 30-day kind of tryout period, and you're able to kind of learn and try it out for yourself. But really, that's the only way you can find out what kind of holster works for you, is if it trying it out and using it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, let's see. I think that's really about it. One of the things I did want to say, what if, we talked about it a couple times, but what if somebody does notice you carrying and they ask you, hey, are you carrying a gun or are you carrying a firearm? Like, what do you think, what do you do in that situation?
It depends on how witty I'm feeling that day.
Has that happened to you?
No, actually it hasn't. I had a friend who's an instructor, and a seasoned instructor, I guess is the best way to put it. And he was asked one time, and he says, "I carry so you don't have to."
Oh, there you go.
Which I thought was a nice response.
Yeah, for sure.
But maybe that person won't take it as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's really situation dependent.
It can be uncomfortable, and honestly, I've never really thought about like if it's a very aggressive verbal altercation or something. I've never really thought about what I might do. Just kind of waiting for that situation to arise when it does, I guess, and I'll handle it whatever way I think is necessary, which is probably going to be the wrong way when it does show up, but who knows?
Well, I think, I did some thinking about this, and I think, you can't really go wrong with kindness and, being courteous. I think as long as you're kind and courteous or whatever, people, there's not really a defense against that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's something that you really want to keep in mind. And that kind of goes back to the mental mindset of carrying anyway, is that, you really want to be, the kindest, calmest, most easygoing person in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to be belligerent or anything anyways. Like most people don't want to be around you if you were. But I don't know. Don't be a jerk.
But at the same time, I think that goes to show that, you've carried for almost 20 years and you've never had anybody come up to you or bother you, or you haven't been caught, I guess.
Yeah, I've had funny looks, but I've never had anybody say anything, or I've never had the cops called on me. I think because at least here in eastern Idaho, it's something that people are pretty much used to anyways.
Sure. And yeah, like that, you bring up a good point that it's really heavily dependent on, I think, where you live. I think, being back in Chicago would be a whole nother story.
Yeah, that could that could get interesting, I bet.
Yeah. You could get into some deep stuff pretty quick. So you got to really think about it. And that's one thing that we talked about traveling, not only knowing the laws, but maybe kind of knowing what the gun culture is like in the area you're going to, because that could really depend or change how you carry and how much you think about printing, or whether or not you use a cover garment. That kind of stuff really makes you think about your carry setup.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely,
definitely something to think about.
You do need to think about it.
Yeah,
because if you're in California or Chicago, like you're saying, it might be a really uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, or you might, like you said, somebody might not even say anything to you, but they might call the cops on you.
Yeah, and guarantee, like I said last time, if it probably won't be, hey, there's a gentleman here carrying a concealed weapon. It's going to be, hey, there's a guy with a gun walking around Walmart.
Yeah, and that's something that you have to kind of assume the worst,
Yeah.
So, well, I think that kind of wraps it up. I think we covered most everything. I'm sure we didn't think of everything, but I think we got a good chunk of concealed carry mistakes and experiences and tips and all that kind of stuff. Is there anything else that we missed?
I don't think so. I think it's just important. Like if you haven't made that leap to concealed carry, if it's something you've really thought about, take a class first of all. Talk to some competent people that you trust or concealed carry. Ask them all sorts of questions, because it may not be right for you. It may not be something that you're really willing to take that step on. Just educate yourself first, and most people that conceal carry, like if they know that I'm sure they'll be willing to to talk to you and help you through and get you set up and ready to go. It's not that big of a deal. Like it's not super scary. It's not something to be embarrassed about. It's worth it. You just have to accept those liabilities, like we talked about last time, that there are some liabilities there as a concealed carry holder that you need to understand.
Yep.
So
yeah, you've got to know what you're getting into, and education is the best way to do that. And it's going to be, it's a lot cheaper to take a class, I would say, than, to go ahead and buy a gun, buy a holster, all that kind of stuff. And, and then you're out that much money,
Yeah. And don't be scared. If you don't own a gun, it doesn't mean you can't take a class. There's ways around that. Like a good instructor will have the ability to get you a firearm to use, or I guarantee you'll have some friends. And sometimes, honestly, at the classes, there's people like, hey, I've got an extra gun if you want to shoot it. Like there's always something.
Yep.
And the gun community is completely different than what the media makes it sound like. Super friendly. Like I've gone to competitions where people are like, oh, it's okay, you can run my gun, or you don't have any ammo, here's a couple hundred rounds. It's okay, let's just shoot. So most people in the gun community are like that, and super helpful. Like we want more people to get involved in the shooting sports. So don't be scared.
Yeah. And, like you said, I mean, people are going to go out of their way to help you if they're, good stewards of the Second Amendment. And, I'd say 99 out of 100 people in the gun world are like that. So, if you ask for the education, you ask for the opportunity, you're going to get it. And, you're going to have a great time and you're going to learn a lot. So,
and it's probably going to turn into an expensive pastime for you.
Yeah.
Be prepared for that too.
Yeah. Make sure you say goodbye to your wallet. So, well, I think on that, we'll end it. If you have any questions for us, maybe something we missed or a question that you had, email us podcast@iishooting.com or send us a Facebook message at Range Minded Podcast and at Instagram as well. We check all three and we'll get back to you. So
right on.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys. Be safe.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Range Minded. Find us online at Range Minded Podcast on Facebook, or send us an email at podcast@iishooting.com. We're always happy to get feedback, episode suggestions, whatever you want to send us, really. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much wherever else you get your podcasts from. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.